Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU Audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Social Sciences, SOSS, Master's Degree Programs, MA in Psychology, MAP, Second Year, MPCE 0 to 2 Assessment in Counseling and Guidance, Block-1 Introduction, Unit-3 The Ambience and Climate Needed for Assessment and Counseling, 3.0 Introduction. The ambience and climate needed for assessment and counseling plays vital role in the success of counseling. When the client comes to the counseling situation, for the first time, he or she will have his/her own reservations, inhibitions, doubts and confusions. These coupled with the problems the client is facing and the anxiety stress he is going through makes it a challenging task for the counselor to build rapport with the client. Hence, it is the prime responsibility of the counselor to ensure a safe and positive environment for the client in the beginning itself. This will help establish rapport between the client and the counselor. The client will feel welcome and unravel his or her inner thoughts and problems. The ambience and climate should be inviting, which will give the initial assurance to the client to open up and express. 3.1 Objectives. After going through this unit, you'll be able to times understand the importance of a safe and positive environment in assessment and counseling, times describe the meaning of rapport in assessment and counseling, times identify the components of counseling setting, times describe the counseling skills required in initial counseling phase, and times explain the different mindsets of clients. 3.2 How to provide safe and positive environment. The counseling service has no magical power to solve every problem immediately. It is essential for those being helped to want to be helped. Assistance is effective to the extent that the individual is open to change and new experiences. The environment and condition in which the individual finds himself or herself play an important role in the process of assistance. It is essential to accept that the effectiveness of assistance will change from person to person, subject to subject and situation to situation. However, it is the utmost responsibility of the counselor to create a safe and positive environment which will enable the client to derive benefits from counseling. Clients come to the counseling situation with their insecurities, fears, inhibitions, uncertainties, and confusions. They require help, assistance and guidance from the counselor to overcome their fears, understand themselves and their situation properly. However, this is possible only when the client gets a feeling of accepted and understood in the counseling situation. A counseling environment where the client feels safe and welcoming will facilitate the process of interaction between the client and the counselor, leading to the ultimate goal of enabling the client to overcome his or her problems. Hence, a safe and positive environment where the client feels encouraged is very crucial for the success of counseling. Two important factors contributing to this are the establishment of rapport with the client and use of various counseling skills by the counselor. These are described below. 3.2.1 Establishing rapport. Rapport establishment is an important activity on the part of the counselor which will create a positive environment for the client. When the client comes initially to the counseling situation, the counselor and the counseling situation is new for him. The counselor needs to establish an effective rapport with the client in order to proceed further in the counseling situation. Rapport refers to relationship. It is a warm, friendly and understanding condition which is essential for an effective relationship between the counselor and the client. Establishing rapport helps the counselor to reach out to the client. This helps to develop a friendly and trusting relationship. Rapport is the first and foremost requirement in a counseling situation. Without rapport between the counselor and the client, counseling cannot happen. Not only rapport has to be established, but also has to be sustained throughout the counseling. How to establish rapport? Rapport requires simple but thoughtful acts like reaching out to greet the client in the first instance, taking interest in the client, expressing warmth, putting him at ease and showing genuine concern. When we meet somebody for the first time, usually we exchange pleasantries. We ask about the other person, basic things like their name, where did they come from, their occupation, etc. If it is a referred case, we already know the person's name. So we can straightaway start by addressing the person by his or her name. In case of a school student, we can ask about his or her friends, classes and studies. Later on, as the counseling progresses, sensitiveness to the client's needs, feelings and problems helps to sustain rapport. A genuine concern for the client's interests and welfare helps in creating a positive counseling environment. Readiness of the client. The readiness of the client affects the establishment of the rapport between the counselor and the client. Usually, clients are of two types: A. Those who seek counseling voluntarily, and B. Those who are referred to the counselor by the school, agency, parents, or court. In the first category, the clients are ready to receive help. They actively want to get help and solve their problems. In such case, establishing rapport is easy and facilitated. It should be noted here that rapport establishment is a two-way process. Hence, when the client is ready and willing to extend himself for the counseling, rapport gets established quickly. In contrast, the second type of clients who are referred may not be willing to take help. Thus, in this category again, you'll find those who want to benefit from counseling and those who resent it. Rapport establishment becomes difficult with those clients who are referred and who resent this referral to the counselor. 3.2.2 Initial counseling skills. Active listening. Listening is a skill, and active listening is much more than mere listening. It can be acquired easily if we develop the habit of being genuinely interested in other people. Many a times we don't listen in a proper way to what the other person is telling. Our listening will be superficial, i.e., not paying much attention to what the other person is saying, or selective, that is, we tend to listen only to those things which we want to listen. Both these will lead to inaccurate listening. Active listening involves paying attention to verbal communication as well as nonverbal communication. The facial expression, postures, gestures, tone of voice of the client, and periods of silence all convey something which need to be observed and attended to by the counselor. This will make the client feel understood, and the counselor can develop insight into the client's problems. Active listening is a very important counseling skill which is required throughout the process of counseling. It is also called attentive listening, which involves listening not only to words but also to the thoughts and feelings of the client. This is very essential as it will very accurately reflect the client's state of mind and what he or she is expressing at present. Asking questions. Remember that the person asking the questions is leading the direction of the conversation. Ask interesting questions that allow the other person to talk about themselves or their interests, and then listen attentively to what they are saying. Allow the client to express himself. Give them positive feedback followed by non-threatening questions that allow them to expand on what they are saying. As a counselor, you should also be aware of the open-ended questions and close-ended questions. Open-ended questions are those where the client can elaborate on his or her answer. The client has a scope to describe the things. However, close-ended questions are those where you get a single-word response only. There is no chance to describe or elaborate on the things. For example, when did this thing happen? Where did you go after the incident? How many times did that happen? All these are close-ended questions. Open-ended questions include, such as how did this happen? Why was he angry with you? The counselor needs to use more open-ended questions so that he or she can get more clear information. However, closed questions are also required for some purpose. Thus, both open-ended and close-ended question need to be used depending on the nature and type of information that the counselor wants to elicit. Communication. counseling is reaching out to the inner world of the client. For this, communication skill is very important. The counselor needs to communicate in such a way that the client feels accepted and shares his or her psychological world with the counselor. A clear and transparent channel of communication should be adopted. The nonverbal aspect of communication also needs to be considered. Not only what the client is saying but also his or her nonverbal behavior. Eye body language, gestures should be observed. This will help the counselor in forming a connection or rapport with the client. The client feels that his or her problems, concerns are being listened to and understood. Empathy. Empathy is a core counseling skill which refers to putting oneself in the other person's shoes. That is, empathy is the capacity to feel with while sympathy is to feel for. According to Rogers, 1961, empathy is a necessary condition in counseling.
He states that empathy is to sense the client's private world as if it were your own, but without ever losing the as if quality. This is empathy, and this seems essential to therapy. To sense the client's anger, fear or confusion as if it were your own, yet without your own anger, fear or confusion getting bound upon it, is the condition we are trying to describe. Here, the counselor has to develop a closeness with the client as well as maintain a distance. The counselor should not get carried away by the client's emotional states. When the counselor feels what the client feels, he or she is showing empathy towards the client. By showing empathy, the counselor acknowledges and tries to understand the subjective world of the client. This creates a positive environment and makes the client feel safe in the counseling situation. Besides these skills, there are a few other things the counselor needs to remember. Develop a friendly nature and establish a habit of smiling. Friendliness puts the client at ease and creates a positive climate. Accept and appreciate the client and give importance to them. One way to do this is to learn their name and use it often during the conversations. Allow them to feel important. It is important to remember to keep your ego under control. Ego has been responsible for breaking rapport on more occasions than any other behavior. Ego is a sign of low self-worth. If the counselor develops a strong feeling of self-worth, then she will not have the need to allow his ego to get in the way. A safe and positive climate is an essential requirement of counseling situation. For this, the counselor needs to establish a proper rapport with the client and use various counseling skills to develop trust in the client and make the client feel secure to express himself. The focus should be on the client. The counselor should convey positive regard for the client. There should not be any judgment or conclusion passed on the client, but respecting the client as a person should be there. This will bring in a positive ambience and climate in the counseling. 3.3 Counseling setting. Prior to engaging in the interpersonal communication process, there are basic requirements which will influence the client's ability to express him, her, and to make decisions regarding the relationship. These aspects refer to the counseling setting, which in the initial meetings can cause a significant impact in the client's perception towards the counselor and the whole counseling process. The physical setting of the counseling should include the following: proper lighting and ventilation, proper infrastructure, facilities, amenities, quiet and calm environment, privacy. The counseling room should create a feeling of quiet and calm with a soothing environment and cheerful ambience. There should not be strong lights, it should not be too hot or cold feeling, and should give a feeling of relaxed atmosphere. The counselor must keep in mind the noise factor also, as it can lead to negative results. Too much noise will distract the client and he or she will not be able to pay proper attention to the test. Noise in the testing room, poor lighting, inaccurate timing, and damaged test equipment may adversely affect test takers. The counselor should ensure that the testing environment is suitable and that administration procedures are uniform for all test takers and the clients. Otherwise, it will affect the accuracy of the assessment and the effectiveness of counseling. Confidentiality of the assessment results is also crucial. A psychological counselor is required to keep his or her discussion with the client confidential. The client needs to be assured of the confidentiality of the test results and the privacy of the counseling sessions. This is an ethical issue which needs to be taken care of. The setting of the counseling should be such that privacy can be ensured. There should not be scope of other people going in and going out of that room. There may be barrier or partitions also to ensure the privacy of the counseling situation. The assessment findings as well as the interactions and deliberations during the counseling session should not be disclosed without the prior consent of the client. The client needs to be assured about the confidentiality of such things. This will help ensure the success of counseling. Example of an initial counseling session is given below in the box. Mr. XYZ is the client today who has taken appointment for 10 a.m. As he knocked on the door and entered the room, I warmly greeted him and asked him to take a seat. The room was well ventilated. Since it was summer, there was air conditioner and the room was cool enough to make one feel comfortable and relaxed. It was an independent room, so no distraction from any other source, e.g., outside noise etc. This also ensured proper privacy for the counseling sessions. The ambience of the room was welcoming. There was proper soothing light with potted plants which gave a relaxed feeling. As the client sat, I asked him did he find any difficulty in reaching the counseling center. I offered him a glass of water to make him comfortable. Then I started, so, you are Mr. XYZ, where do you work? Who are there in your family? Like this some general things were asked to make the client feel at home. Here the main goal is to establish rapport with the client. We are not going to start asking about his problems in the beginning itself. First, the client needs to feel comfortable and develop trust in the counselor. The counselor needs to tell the client about the confidentiality aspect also. The counselor has to use the different counseling skills as described above to make the client feel confident about the counselor. For example, as the client is sitting in the chair, the counselor notices that the client is fidgeting. The counselor needs to observe this and try to make the client comfortable. After the client feels secure in the counseling environment, he is ready to open up and share issues with the counselor. 3.4 Mindset of the client when it comes to interpersonal communication in assessment and counseling. Being flexible and responsive is one of the most beneficial skills a counselor can have. Clients come with different mindsets and emotional states, and the counselor's ability to adjust to a client's needs is likely to dictate the success of that relationship. Following is a description of the diversity of mindsets with which clients approach counseling. The 5 types of mindsets and the respective strategies to deal with them to help improve the relationship and enhance client-counselor rapport are given below. A. An emotionally unstable client. The client is emotionally unstable and finds difficulty in expressing him/herself. Emotionally unstable clients normally require a client-centered approach which enforces the need to establish rapport and trust, and to ensure the client is aware that he or she is in a safe and friendly environment. The client will normally have difficulty in expressing him/herself because he/she is unable or not ready to deal with emotions. Counseling strategies to establish rapport would include using self-disclosure to relate to the client's situation and create an emotional link, creating goals and accountability in order to encourage action from the client, providing transparency and positivity through communication. B. An involuntary or skeptical client. The client has been forced to attend to counseling, e.g. legally mandated. This type of client may be difficult to deal with in the early stages of the relationship. Normally, he or she will be skeptical about the process, and may not acknowledge any need to change. It is important for the therapist to gain respect from the client, and use that respect to establish trust. One of the most common strategies to gain respect and create responsiveness from the client is to outline the process of counseling, what he or she is there for, what is the structure of the relationship, what are the rights and duties of the client, what might be the expected positive outcomes. Solution-focused strategies are a good way to create a sense of accountability and need for change. C. The client is adolescent or a child. Dealing with children is always challenging as there is a perceived, bigger, communication gap. The goal for the counselor is to establish trust using humors, engaging in activities such as games, encouraging a collaborative approach, using self-disclosure and role-playing. These are all common strategies to help improve communication with young clients. The counselor has to come down to the child's level and empathize with him or her. Winning the trust of the child is a challenging task as they'll not easily be amenable to counseling. Most of the cases, they will be referral cases. Hence, they may not be willing to undergo counseling and develop a resentment attitude. Hence, extreme care needs to be exercised while dealing with adolescent or child clients. The counseling setup should be such that the child feels attracted to it. It should be designed keeping in mind the interests and concerns of the particular group of children.
For example, counseling room should have variety of toys, children's books, literature, and play materials which will help the children to feel at ease and comfortable. There can be a sand pit, different puzzle games, board games, toy animals, etc. The ambience should be as per the interests of the children. A proper environment will help children and young clients to trust the counselor and express the different issues, concerns related to them. D. The uncommitted client. Lack of commitment can be a challenging problem in the counseling setting. Normally, a client with little or no commitment has a specific agenda which justifies their attendance at a counseling session. An example would be a husband who was asked by his wife to attend counseling in order to preserve their marriage. Framing and reframing are good tactics to remodel the way the client perceives the counseling relationship, shifting from the helping mode to the collaborative approach. Creating goals and structuring will also motivate the client to go through the necessary stages for change, collect the rewards, and move on with his/her own life. E. The demanding client. A demanding client will normally believe that the counselor will provide answers to his/her problems. They will come to counseling without much resolve to act upon their current situation and will normally create very unrealistic expectations regarding counseling relationship and the counselor. These clients will expect the counselor to give them suggestions and solve their problems. They need to be clarified that the onus for changing things and getting solutions lies with the client only. The counselor can help and provide appropriate guidance to the client to enable him or her to understand self and situational factors. Accordingly, they need to take a decision or plan a course of action. 3.5 Pre-counseling interview. The counseling process usually consists of three parts: the request for assistance, intake, the counseling proper, counseling, and the termination of the counseling relationship. The pre-counseling interview is the beginning of the actual contact between the client and the counselor. The client usually comes to the counseling situation with lots of apprehension, unsure of what is going to happen. The counselor needs to take care of this by structuring the counseling. This will calm down the insecurities and confusions in the mind of the client and create a safe and positive climate for the client. Many clients come with the expectation of getting a ready-made solution to their problem. When you go to a doctor, he gives you medicine for your fever, and you are cured. However, counseling is not like this. Since counseling involves human dynamics, issues of interrelationship, the changing nature of human beings, the counseling process requires involvement and commitment by the client as well as the counselor. The client is made to understand that he has to function within a system or structure. He is given an idea of what is going to happen in counseling. The details of the sessions, duration, fees, types of psychological tests to be administered, and other related issues are discussed. The issue of confidentiality and privacy is also discussed with the client. Further, the roles and responsibilities of the client as well as the counselor in the counseling process is explained. Any misconception that the client might be having is dispelled at this stage. 3.5.1 Preliminary assessment. In counseling, the process of assessment begins before the first interview when the counselor takes the initial counseling interview. Typical items include the client's name, address, age, educational and work history, reason for referral to counseling, and whether the client has been or is being counseled elsewhere. The assessment process will enable the counselor to evaluate the client's needs and will help the counselor to select the most appropriate type of assessment tools for the individual. A positive counseling environment should be established, which will help the client give information and take the necessary psychological tests. The counselor should review the fairness evidence associated with assessment instruments. Before selecting tools, the counselor must be clear about the relevance of the test by examining the test manual and independent test reviews. If a person takes the same test again, will he or she get a similar score or a very different score? A reliable instrument will provide accurate and consistent scores to meaningfully interpret test scores and make useful career or employment related decisions. Use only reliable tools. Test manuals usually will provide a statistic known as the reliability coefficient, giving you an indication of a test's reliability. The higher the reliability coefficient, the more confidence you can have that the score is accurate. Validity is the most important issue in selecting assessment tools. It refers to 1. The characteristic the assessment instrument measures, and 2. How well the instrument measures the characteristic. Validity is not a property of the assessment instrument itself, it relates to how the instrument is being used. Test manuals provide information about both the development and psychometric characteristics of tests. They inform about the procedures for administration, scoring, and interpretation, the recommended uses of an instrument, the groups for whom the test is appropriate, and test norms. They also should include a description of the validation procedures used and evidence of validity, reliability, and test fairness. Assessment instruments must be administered properly in a conducive environment to obtain valid results. Assessment is a crucial part in the process of counseling. A good assessment will lead to a better understanding of the situation of the client. For this, the counselor needs to have a proper environment including an adequate physical setting with suitable infrastructure and other facilities. 3.6 Summary. In this unit you learned about the importance of a proper counseling environment, the effectiveness of psychological assessment carried out in counseling, and the success of counseling process itself depends upon proper ambience and climate. A safe and positive environment is a prime requirement of counseling. You also learned that the counselor needs to keep in mind the different aspects such as the physical setting of counseling, readiness of the client and rapport establishment, which help in creating a safe and positive climate for the client in counseling. The initial counseling skills which help develop assurance, trust, and confidence in the client were also described. You came to know that clients come with a variety of mindsets and how to deal with them in the pre-counseling interview. Thank you. Subscribe to our channel for more updates, and we will see you with the next chapter.